So as you know, TikTok has been banned and it's a threat to national security. And as you know, it's not just about TikTok and the censorship bans, the uh, the Facebook fact checking is not just about Facebook fact checking. This will spread to the rest of the internet. As you all know, if you've been paying attention since like the SOPA bills from the early 2000s. Anyways, Ken Klippenstein posts a leaked document that the Biden administration basically made it so that as TikTok gets banned, it's fused into the State Department, and at the same time, it's being used only for business. So, I had this conversation with my spouse, like, what if some social media websites are banned but only used as pure business models? Like, if the internet is only used purely for business and you don't go on the internet for forums anymore, like back in the old days, it used to be for forums, but nowadays it's censorship, or you get paid to say a certain thing based on the threshold of like a certain audience. Anyways, the looming ban on TikTok will not apply to certain U.S. State Department employees responsible for public diplomacy, according to internal cable signed by Secretary of State Antony Blinken that I obtained. According to the document, the Biden administration has quietly exempted these personnel from the ban, quote, regardless of any potential failure of TikTok to be divested of its foreign PRC, People's Republic of China ownership, end quote. Here's why that's ironic. Public diplomacy refers to U.S. State Department messaging, i.e., propaganda targeted at foreign audience, quote, to promote U.S. interest abroad, as the department put it. In other words, while the Biden administration is trying to ban Chinese owned TikTok over concerns about foreign influence operations, the White House is quietly working to use TikTok for its own foreign influence activities. This is just one of the bundle of contradictions in the administrations to ban the app, not the least of which includes the fact that both Biden and Harris campaign aggressively used TikTok last year to reach millions of voters. Now, this would be like saying we're not going to take away your guns because we both have guns. Now, obviously, I don't think anyone's actually planning on taking them away. But in terms of the rhetoric about like gun violence and using that as leverage to take them away, it's never happened. But anyways, a spokesperson for the State Department did not respond to a request for a comment at the time of publication. The Supreme Court is currently hearing a case brought by TikTok arguing that the proposed ban would violate the First Amendment. At the heart of the debate is whether TikTok is distinctive enough that American speech taking place on the platform could happen elsewhere. Publicly, the Biden administration argues that competing platforms are plenty good enough to substitute for TikTok, but privately, the administration appears to think otherwise. As the cable I obtained suggests, the document opens with an explicit reference to the substantial opportunity cost of being unable to use TikTok, saying, the Bureau of Global Public Affairs (GBA) recognizes that substantial opportunity cost of public diplomacy practitioners' inability to access TikTok, and is pleased to share the department has approved two limited exceptions to the general prohibitions on the use of the platform. So if you, the American public, would like to exercise your First Amendment rights on TikTok, tough luck. Instagram and YouTube are good enough. Never mind the suite of uh, intuitive video editing software available on TikTok, but not those other platforms. Quit your whining and make do. Unless, of course, you're the government, in which case only TikTok will do, in case the cable stresses how crucial the platform is due to its popularity and status as, quote, a primary source of news for audiences around the world, particularly among young people. Quote, the platform, now one of the most downloaded digital platforms globally, is increasingly a primary source of news for audiences around the world, including those under 35 years of age, a critical demographic for PD engagement. In the uh, in the near term, conversations on the platform shape the policy environment in which we operate. Longer term, they are shaping the perceptions of a generation of forward audiences. So, I'll get to the next thing about Red Note in a second, but I do find it more disrespectful um, than this situation that's actually happening now. Anyways, the cable, dated January 5th of this year, and sent to the State Department's public officials, Section PAS goes on to explain the legal maneuver the Biden administration used to carve out the loophole. While the 2022 Number TikTok on the Government Device Act prohibits the use of the app on government devices, the cable points to a section of the law that permits agencies to make exceptions for national security interests and activities, end quote. So the State Department concluded, going on to say, an assessment of national security and legal considerations, and surprise, public diplomacy officials qualify as well as contractors. As is often the case, national security is more elastic concept than the First Amendment. I mean, it's only becoming like that since 9/11 and the contact tracing technology of COVID could have been weaponized, at least in China. But, anyways, the cable describes two categories of exceptions in particular. The first pertains to, quote, monitoring and analysis on TikTok, under which they're allowed to lurk on the platform but not post. The second category applies to contracting with digital content creators. A section on this second category includes the following suggestive remark, quote, there is increasing PD interest in the need to contract with the digital content creators who focus on foreign audiences to produce and disseminate content about the department's work. We all will be banned from TikTok, but hey, at least Mr. Beast will still be a sponsored content for Uncle Sam. Okay, Mr. Beast is not buying TikTok. That's just not happening, and we know it didn't happen. But anyways, getting to this, so Red Note may wall off TikTok refugees to prevent U.S. influence on Chinese users. So this is a national security issue for China, actually, and American users thought they were being censored on both America on purpose and China to not be able to have a website to go to. But I mean, China already walls off its citizens from websites that involve politics, like Facebook and Reddit. So the censorship was already enacted on its own people, and I think Americans are being a little you know, emotional and skeptical. I mean, obviously they have their skepticisms about the Chinese government, but they're being a little paranoid. Um, just a few days after more than 7 million new users flooded RedNote, which Time noted, quote, is the most apolitical platform in China, end quote. Rumors began swirling that RedNote may soon start segregating American users and other foreign IPs from the app's Chinese users. So, because this was initially a Chinese app, like purely, um, it is just like I don't think it's necessarily segregation in the sense that like obviously you need translations, like separated translations. So I think the wording here segregating Americans is a little weird. So in the TikTok cringe subreddit, a video from Red Note user with red eyes, presumably swollen from tears, suggested that Americans had possibly ruined the app for Chinese Americans who rely on Red Note to stay current on Chinese news and culture. Red Note, or Xiao Hongshu, released on an update in the Greater Chinese region with the function to separate foreign IPs, and there are now talks of moving all foreign IPs to a separate server, and having a different IP for those who are in a Greater Chinese area. The Reddit poster said, and goes on to say, I know through VPNs and other ways, people still able to access the app, but essentially this is going to kill the app for Chinese Americans who usually use the app to connect with Chinese content, Chinese language, Chinese culture, etc. So obviously the CCP doesn't want American influence to spread to their citizens, and this is mostly a youth problem, as we have gone over in what Ken Klippenstein has posted. Now, I would have to say that this is something in the Great Reset that it talks about that social media is mostly being revolutionized by the youth. And I guess since China is usually so censorship about its politics, it really does see this as a national security issue. Even if I do see this as a little rude that American youth are spreading their, their culture into a purely rules of engagement for China. Like, so as you'll see here, people are actually going to end up in jail if they don't learn the culture. And I'm not sure how much I feel about that. Yeah, the TikTok refugees, they don't seem to know or care about the platform rules because they're mostly just, they just think it's the internet and they can just do whatever they want. You know, they're not going to be that respectful for the policies about not talking about politics and religion and drugs. Though in America, there's forums that have been like that. Like you stick to certain topics. So I think it's just this generation that can't handle like certain rules. And so they're actually going to risk being arrested, supposedly, which is insane. So there needs to be proper translation, or else this is going to get ugly. All right. I'll see you in the next one.